These are undone watches. If you're familiar with wristwatches on YouTube, chances are you've probably seen these before. Since their launch in 2014, I think it was, they've done a good job of getting their product into the hands of various influencers. Funnily enough, including me. They sent me these about 10 months ago for me to take a look at over on my other channel. This brand has a rather unique value proposition. They offer vintage styled watches with modern components. Not only that, but you can also modify various aspects of your watches using their online customizer. I'd say this is the coolest part of the whole process, and it's by far the cleanest and easiest program of its kind for wristwatches that I've tried. You get to choose from a variety of dial options. You can customize the color of the case, the style of the hands, the type of strap even. There are a massive number of possibilities with this editor and it works really well. You can even get logos or letters and stuff imprinted onto the watches, though for the ones they sent me, I chose not to bother with that. Realistically, it's not true bespoke customization. You can't draw on a piece of paper and send the brand a custom design, if you like. They can't build a specific watch to your requirements. That would be a miracle for £200. Either way, I think the way that this is set up makes it easy for both brand and customer, and as such, is probably the best method anyway. More options might be better moving forward though. I'd love the option to change the glass, for instance, or the movement, both of which we'll talk about later. I think a question that you'll probably have when you use the customizer is, are these pictures representative of the real life watches? And I'd say that's definitely the case with these ones anyway. The colours are so accurate. I mean, it's going to vary slightly depending on the monitor of the device that you're using, but really they look very, very similar to the real life watches, which is good. The customizer still works really smoothly on a decade-old laptop of mine as well, which is what I used to use for YouTube videos. And it apparently also works on tablets, though I couldn't check that one. So we've got a few of these to look at. I picked various types out of their Urban series because that was the only one available at the time. These aren't individual reviews. Maybe I should save that for their own specific video because that would go on forever. And to be clear, they haven't paid me any money to say anything good about these watches. They don't know that this channel exists. So as always, I'm just going to give my full honest thoughts on them. If horology is important to you, this brand probably isn't the way to go. It was only started a few years ago, so it's not got the decades of history that other brands have got. The founder, Michael Young, is apparently a luxury watch connoisseur, though. He's a well-known repairer in the community. So at least it's nice to know that the guy at the head of the company has got some idea what he's doing. These watches are all made in Hong Kong. I do think the manufacturing is quite significantly better than the majority of these Chinese constructed watches that I've come across before. They have some short clips of the manufacturing process online, which gives a little bit of insight. My general impression with these is that the craftsmanship is pretty decent. It's definitely not one of those brands made in street-side sweatshops by 5-year-olds. One thing to note is that these micro-brand pieces don't have the same level of resale value as you get with some more famous branded pieces. So if that's of importance to you, keep that in mind. Undone offers a variety of standard designs to choose from. All of the ones I own are chronographs, some more functional than others. As you can probably tell, these designs are evidently inspired by certain watches throughout history. They have a real vintage vibe about them. There's definitely two that are my clear favourites design-wise. The first one is the Urban Killy, which has a real 1920s vibe about it. It's got that cream dial with the blue and red accents. I love the shape of the numbers with that curvature, so nice. I found this one goes really well with a variety of outfits, despite the fact that it looks like it's almost from 100 years ago. The other watch I like is the Mystique. This one takes a very different approach, I'd say. This one is way more minimalist, has a beautiful sunburst effect, which I really like. This one is more dressy and a bit less versatile than the other one, but it looks even better in terms of quality. This one looks as good in person as on video, and I think it looks great for a £200 watch. As a whole, those two are two of the most complimented out of my whole collection for sure. That being said, the other two, they don't really tickle my fancy so much. There are definitely some Speedmaster feelings going on here. And while they look fine, they just don't grab me. One of them's got like a bit of a fake patina, which I'm not really a fan of. Doesn't look very natural in my eyes. Overall though, all of them, they've got a good amount of interesting depth and texture to the dial, which is something that a lot of cheaper end watches just lack. The logo's really small at the bottom center of all of them as well, and I think as a whole they're quite well done. Despite all of them having very similar looking subdials, I still think there is a big variety to choose from. Some of these contain a small amount of lume, others contain none, but overall for these style of watches that's not really expected. As they are part of the same range, they've all got the same basic size specifications, coming in at just under 40mm in diameter, with a 13mm case depth and a 20mm lug width. With the lug-to-lug size being 47.5mm, as a whole, I think they're quite a wearable size. These should be really versatile for a variety of wrist sizes, especially in a world where some of these more fashionable chronograph-style watches are like 45mm. Nevertheless, I think more size options would be appreciated because, as of filming this video at least, these are the only sizes that these watches are available in. If these came in at 37mm, I think it would be a killer. I also think that in a perfect world, although overall I like the shape and style of the case, I think the lugs would benefit from being just that little bit shorter. At the moment, I think they just protrude a little bit too much, but that's me being a bit nitpicky. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. The case construction overall is solid. These are made of the popular 316L stainless steel, which is the go-to choice these days for watches around this price. You get a mixture of brushed and polished surfaces, which gives it some nice texture. The quality of the steel seems surprisingly good. I've got basically no scratches on any of them so far. So wherever they've sourced this from, done a much better job than other fashion watches using a similar material, because I've had countless cases scratched before like a piece of Lego, so these are pretty decent. With the customizer, you also have the option of either having a completely plain rear, or you can have one with an exhibition case back, revealing the mecha quartz movement inside. Either option comes with a low 380M of water resistance, which is somewhat to be expected with this type of watch, but more would be better. Each of these models is fitted with a domed piece of K1 mineral crystal. While these do look great, and I still prefer them to the regular flat piece, I think it's still really frustrating. There's honestly no excuse for not having sapphire at this sort of price point. There's plenty of other brands doing it. I asked the brand about this, and their reasoning was essentially it was for the aesthetics, but I'm not buying it. I think it's just an area that they've cut costs. The mineral crystal will provide some limited scratch protection, but it's nothing on sapphire. When you've got certain Chinese brands easily putting a piece of sapphire in watches around, 30 to 60 pounds, there's no excuse why a £200 watch should have this in my mind, regardless of what brand makes it. These do come with a signed crown and great feeling pushers for the chronograph functions. Powering these watches is an interesting Seiko VK61 mecha quartz movement. If you're not familiar with these are essentially kind of like a hybrid between a regular battery-powered quartz movement and a mechanical one, resulting in a combination that will give you a sweeping second hand, which is representative of a mechanical piece, whilst retaining the superb accuracy of quartz. Personally, I really like these movements for a couple of reasons. They're incredibly easy to live with, nice and quiet. They're also nice and slim, which works well for my skinny wrists. However, given the fact that these don't really have any moving parts, I think it's kind of counterintuitive to have the option for a display case back anyway. There's nothing on show here outside of just some static pieces of metal and a battery. Like, how would anyone want to look in the back? Unless it's a mechanical watch, I just don't see the point of these. Maybe some of this might tie in with the ability to put your logo on the rear, I'm not sure. On that note, while I do think that this is a good movement for these watches, it is to be noted that you can get automatic watches from a much lower price point. If you prefer mechanical watches, these don't have that same aura of craftsmanship. Nevertheless, outside of something like a Seagull 1963, there really aren't many better choices. If you want an automatic chronograph at least, there really isn't much to choose from whatsoever, so I think that having this is a pretty good halfway house at this sort of cost. With the straps, I think there is some variance between them when it comes to both the design and also the quality especially. All of the ones I have here are made of genuine leather, which is a low quality of leather as a whole. The one I've got on the Urban Killy feels pretty cheap and plasticky, if I'm honest. I don't think this will wear particularly well over time, but to be transparent, this isn't the default one that you would get with the standard Killy. I changed it to this because I preferred the colour on the customizer, but maybe that was a mistake. The rally strap on the Tropical feels a lot better, but it has scratched incredibly easily. The two black straps are by far and away the best, especially the one on the Mystique, which is definitely one of the best straps I've come across overall. It's nice and plush, feels thick without being artificial, and it's got some nice flexibility to it. I think that this will last really, really well. It's just a shame that that level of consistency isn't really there from what I've seen so far. There are, of course, many other options on the website which I haven't tried yet, but first impressions, I think it's a really mixed bag here. Some of these I'd have to change, others I'd be totally fine with the stock one. So you can buy the majority of these watches for about £200. Discount codes are readily dished out to influencers, which normally give you about 10% off, which would make these standard ones about £180. I'll have a look back if they've sent me some sort of discount code or affiliate link. I'll put that in the video description. Though it is to be noted, if you're putting certain customization options onto these, the price can raise somewhat. I think overall, that's a pretty fair price. On paper, it's true that these watches, they don't look too far from the infamous fashion brands that I've covered many times before. You know which I'm talking about. I've heard a bunch of people online saying that these are just exactly the same as them. From my experience over the last year with these, I think these are a far better proposition. There are some similarities, such as the strong social media presence of the brand, the regional manufacturing, the lack of brand heritage, and I can understand that that will put some people off. These are slightly more expensive too, depending on which models you look at, but I think offer better value for money on a number of levels. The level of finishing, for instance, is really nice on these. This is definitely comparable to similar Orient models I've come across before, and those are often considered some of the best watches in this sort of price range, so I've got to be fair and judge these accordingly. The stock designs as well have obviously had some careful thought put into them, unlike some other brands. The choice of movement is also somewhat interesting compared to the generic cheap quartz movements you can get. And the fact that you can customize many areas of the watch gives these a much more unique selling point. There are other brands out there who've got somewhat comparable design systems, but there's no doubt in my mind that this Undone one seems the best so far. The gift box that they come in is even better than most brands I've come across. That being said, I've seen them being advertised as luxury before. Do I think that's true? No, these aren't luxury watches, in my opinion at least. Are these some fairly priced, customizable watches that are of usable, solid quality and offer great aesthetics? I'd say so, yeah. You can get something that looks like a vintage watch without any of the upkeep issues associated with those, which is what would put a lot of people off, including myself. I'd like to see them priced a little bit lower. I think they'd be much more competitive if they were sitting in the £120 to £150 range, especially due to the lack of strong water resistance and sapphire glass. There is strong competition from the likes of Seiko, Orient and Citizen in this price range, which do offer in-house mechanical movements for many models, though they are non-chronograph models and don't offer customization. Though I can see how at £200 some people would prefer rival offerings. You can get some great looking watches at about half the price of this. That being said, I think there is enough differentiation here to give these guys a place on the market. I think it is worth mentioning, as a gift option, these could be particularly interesting because they give the recipient the ability to essentially make the watch look exactly how they want, thus never be disappointed. So that's my overall thoughts on these watches. I do quite like them, though I think that I am probably their exact target market, so I'm expected to, really. I think if you order one of these, you probably wouldn't have any buyer's remorse. There's a link to these down below in the video description if you want to check them out.